What's up, everybody? Welcome back to yet another episode of Go Talk Marcus presented by the Give Us a Shot Network. Tonight, we are talking all things week 2. There's a couple teams that are 2-0 that no one expected to be 2-0. There's a couple teams that are 0-2 that no one expected to be 2-0. Plus, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle might just be the best 1-2 punch in the league at the wide receiver position. And the Minnesota Vikings have still decided that playing with fire is the best way to win football games. Or is it? Stay tuned for Go Talk Marcus next.
Give them a shot to do what?
Emmitt, my man, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. I know we're really not talking about it a whole lot today, but our Packers look good through 2 weeks. Listen. Not like awesome, not like top 10 NFL team, but like Jordan Love doesn't look like a scrub, and I was kind of worried that he was gonna, and he doesn't. That feels good. Again, heartbreaking loss this week, but for a young team, they need to learn how to win. But I'm doing pretty good, especially in the sports world.
Yeah, I'd say so. I agree. I think it's great. Look, there's a lot to talk about. And speaking of the Packers, the team that beat us, unfortunately, this past Sunday, the Atlanta Falcons, are one of those teams that I think, as I mentioned earlier, no one expected to be 2-0 at this point in the season. But as the old saying goes, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And so when you look across the NFL and when you look at the teams that are 2-0, and in case you've been living under a rock, I'll tell you who those teams are right now. The Cowboys, Eagles, and Commanders, all 2-0. The Falcons, Saints, Bucks, 2-0. 49ers, 2-0. Dolphins, Ravens, 2-0. That is it. Of all those teams, who would you say is the most surprising 2-0 start so far?
I think it has to be one of those 3 NFC South teams. And specifically, I think I'm going to go, because I think you look at the rest of them, right? The Niners, obviously, they were in the NFC Championship last year. That's not super shocking. The Cowboys and Eagles, not super shocking. Maybe before the season, maybe the Cowboys, I guess a little bit if you believed in the Giants or Jets. The AFC, all there really is Baltimore and Miami, and I think that they both had 2 games, or they had games where you can obviously see them winning. But the Falcons, they had the Packers, and I believe, I forget who they had in week 1. They had the Panthers. Sorry, they had the Panthers in week 1, Packers in week 2. I think those are like toss-up games. And the Saints, I think they got a lot better at quarterback with Derek Carr. The Bucks, for me, man, the Buccaneers, I did not see being here at 2-0. The Vikings in the first game, you're at the Vikings. This is Baker Mayfield's first start as the quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I didn't see 2-0 happening. And I especially didn't see it in the fashion that we're looking at it, right? Where Baker Mayfield has played good through 2 games. Listen, he's not an MVP or anything like that, but he has played extremely well. He's not turning the ball over, 3 touchdowns, no picks through 2 games. He's a high completion percentage guy right now, 69.1%. And then his average in terms of throwing the ball down the field is actually pretty good, 7.2 yards per attempt. But one of the biggest things for these first couple of games, he's only been sacked once. That offensive line has kind of been shaky, especially last year. You look, that's one of the reasons that they got dominated by the Cowboys in the postseason, is the fact that their offensive line was kind of makeshift. And if I'm not mistaken, they lost Shaq Mason this offseason, or maybe it was towards the end of last year. They lost Shaq Mason. Their running game isn't necessarily anything that I'm super scared of. Yes, Rachaad White has looked pretty good so far this year when it comes to yards, but he has a very low average. They're not a team who's really threatening you. As a team, they're rushing for less than 3 yards a carry. Not great. And I didn't expect him to really, have the time with the bad offensive line to get the ball to Mike Evans, which he has done. Mike Evans has looked fantastic. Getting almost 20 yards a catch, already has 2 touchdowns. Again, a lot of that coming in last week's game, but I did not see the Buccaneers being at 2-0 right now. I just didn't see it. And especially, I guess I think I could have seen it from the other 2 teams just because of, worse competition. And yes, again, they played the Vikings and the Bears, and both of those teams have a combined 0 wins. So I guess you could look back at that and say, but I think there was a lot of hype coming into the season around the Bears and Justin Fields. There was a lot of noise last year with the Vikings being a 13-win team. I did not see Baker and the Buccaneers being 2-0.
I I want to say it's bigger than the Buccaneers, but I can't. And I can't, not because I expect them to be 2-0, because I do think there is one team that I think is more surprising, at least for me, to be 2-0. It's the Washington Commanders. Beating the Cardinals is not a surprise because the Cardinals are probably going to be the worst team in football this year, and they're probably going to end up with Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison in the draft next year. But beating the Denver Broncos in Denver, coming back down from, what was it, 21-3, 24-3 to win that game 35-33. Almost lost at the end with the Hail Mary, and they kind of got away with the DPI and the two-point conversion. But I think there's there. I'm surprised that the Commanders are 2-0 because what do we have here with the what do we really like? Okay, Terry McLaurin, I got you. Jahan Dotson, I got you. Offensively, though, that's really it. Like, this offensive line isn't that great. The run game's not that great. Like, Sam Howell, he's been okay. Three picks, 3 touchdowns to 1 pick in the first 2 games of the season, throw for 501 yards. He's completing 66% of his passes, but he's not like a world beater. This defense hasn't been a shutdown defense the past 2 weeks. I mean, they gave up 33 to the Broncos, and they almost lost to the Cardinals in week 1. So for me, I did not expect the Commanders to be 2-0. Well, I will say, though, is that they are not 2-0 because of their own doing. Like, they are 2-0 because of the virtue of the situation. Now, they beat the Cardinals, worst team in football. They beat the Broncos. The Broncos looked terrible in that second half, and that has been something to expect, something that we should expect from the Broncos because they were the same way last season. I don't expect this to continue for the Commanders, but if there is one team on the list that I would say is it's surprising that they're 2-0, for me, it's the Commanders. The Commanders, I mean, okay, maybe 1-1 this season, maybe not a big deal, but to be 2-0, to beat the Denver Broncos, a team that a lot of people thought Russ was going to come back and be his old self, and Broncos country, let's ride. And here comes Mr. Sean Payton leading the charge, and it hasn't been that. For me, that's surprising because the Commanders should not be 2-0. They shouldn't be 2-0.
I think that's where you and me differ. I was not as surprised, not because I was high on Washington, but because I think we both agree Cardinals week 1, easy win, right? We both agree on that. Yeah. The pick that I felt the most confident in this week was Washington over Denver. I am not very high on Denver as a known Russell Wilson hater. I was not very high on Denver. Especially this week, and I think because I think a lot of people are overrating Denver a little bit because I don't think that they're as talented as they were last year, right? That's what happens when you trade away Bradley Chubb, and I also think that people were calling it like a coaching mismatch, is what I heard a lot of people saying, like, "Oh, this is just it's a clear coaching mismatch," right? As if Ron Rivera hasn't been in the league for as long as Sean Payton, right? Like I feel like you can usually,
and as if they're not at one point were in the same division,
right? Right, exactly. Like they're as if it's just like, oh, like he has no idea how to coach against Sean Payton or something like that. I don't know. So maybe it was not as surprising for me, but like, would I have put them at 2-0? Like, who they played helps out a lot. But like when you think of 2-0 team, Commanders does not pop to your head.
No. Not for me. And maybe it's because I as a DC native, as someone that knows pretty much 95% of the people I know are Commanders fans, like I am so used to seeing them talk so much trash about the Eagles and Eagles fans, and talk so much trash about the Cowboys and Cowboys fans, and talk so much trash about Giants and Giants fans, and like, but they're like just as delusional, if not more delusional than all of those fans put together. I don't know. For me, you look at the Cowboys, right? The Cowboys went out there. I don't think anyone expected the Cowboys were going to win on Sunday night against the Giants. I don't think anyone expected the dominant performance that we saw, but I think they'll win there. Obviously, no one expected Aaron Rodgers to tear his Achilles 4 plays into the season, but heading into the week, no Aaron Rodgers, no problem for Dallas. That's no problem. Eagles are the reigning NFC champions. No surprise there. You go down to the Falcons. The Falcons are a young team, but they've played 2 of the youngest teams in football as well. They beat us last week. They should not have, but they did beat us on Sunday, and then they also beat Bryce Young and the Panthers in their debut. We saw the Saints. The Saints are 2-0. got the better of, if I believe, the Raiders in week 1. Nothing crazy there. And they, of course, beat the Panthers on Monday night. The Buccaneers, to your point, should they have really beaten the Vikings? Maybe not, but the Vikings also not a good football team. And then they also beat I forgot who they played this past week as well. The Bears, not a good football team. On the AFC side of things, like the Dolphins, do we expect them to be 2-0? No. Did I expect them to beat the Patriots? Yes. Did I expect them to beat the Chargers? No, but it was a shootout. So I'm not surprised that they won because they have the offensive artillery to get that done. The Ravens, a lot of people think the Ravens are, when healthy, the best team in the division. They are the best team in the division right now. So, like, it makes sense. Not healthy, but the best team in the division right now. And then that's it. The two AFC teams for me, no big deal. And for me, Cowboys, Eagles, I think the Saints can make it to the NFC Championship. I don't think they're going to, but I think they could. And so to me, them being 2-0 is not surprising either. So for me, it was really between the Commanders and the Falcons. And I think the Falcons are the better football team. So it's a little bit slightly more surprising to me for the Commanders. But as I said, it's not just about how you start. We can see all of these teams fall away. But for the teams that are 0-2, it's important to know that it is about how you finish. And so when you look at the Vikings, when you look at the Bears, the Panthers, the Cardinals, when you look at the Patriots, the Bengals, the Texans, the Chargers, and the Broncos, same thing, opposite side. Which of these teams is it most surprising? And I think I know what the answer is going to be because I feel like there's only one clear answer. But which team would you say is most surprising at the 0-2 spot at this point of the season?
Listen, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to answer this question exactly how it's written because I think the most surprising is the Bengals.
Yes.
Right. And I know that's who you're planning on talking about. Or I believe it is. Because it's your Super Bowl pick, right? You're at your MVP, Joe Burrow, not looking good. Got a little fat and happy with that big contract, huh?
Yeah.
No, but I'm gonna talk about who I'm most worried about, and that's the Chargers, man. That the San Diego, or sorry, not San Diego, the Los Angeles Chargers.
They're playing like the San Diego
Chargers. The Los Angeles Chargers are really starting to worry me, man. Because it's every year that they find new and creative ways to lose games. Yeah. And do I think Brandon Staley's a awesome head coach? No, I don't. However, as opposed to a lot of people, I tend to agree with a lot of the wacky stuff he does in terms of the fourth down and the going forward on 2-point conversion. I am way more on the analytical side of things, so I start to agree with him on that. But man, it seems like every game they go into, they find a way to get outcoached. And also, one of the reasons I'm really worried about them, man, they don't have a super easy next however many games. I mean, they're practically playing in an elimination game next week. They play at the Vikings. Again, both teams who are 0-2, who I don't know that people would put them at 0-2 to start the season. Then you have the Raiders. That should be easy. But again, it's at home. They don't have a home field advantage. Who knows what happens? Then they have the Cowboys and the Chiefs back-to-back. That's not great for them. The Bears, that should be an easy win. But again, at home, no home field advantage. They just have a very brutal division schedule. They still have to play the Bills. They still have to play the Chiefs twice, the Broncos, who will probably play them tight twice, the Ravens. They have to play the Packers, the Jets, the Lions. I mean, like, they have a pretty rough schedule. And I'm really worried, man, because a lot of people really didn't understand. And listen, did I fully understand what he meant when Mike McCarthy said, like, sometimes I don't want to put up like a bunch of points. Did I really understand it? It's like, well, no, yeah. I mean, I think John Madden had a great quote. It's like, the team who scores the most points wins the game, and yes, that is true. However, man, they got Kellen Moore out of that building and they put up two of the most dominant wins I've seen in a very long time. Did their offense look super impressive in either of those games, the Cowboys? No, not at all. But man, that Chargers offense, they're going to put up some numbers, right? They're going to put up some fantastic numbers. But at the end of the day, man, we look and how that game ended versus the Dolphins, I think has a lot to play into it. Where they looked fairly competent all day, and then all of a sudden they can't protect Justin Herbert. They couldn't do it. This is the second year in a row. Or what? Now, I think this is year 3 now for Brandon Staley, where it's like they look incompetent on defense. You're a defensive head coach, dude. Figure it out. You shouldn't be. Yes, I understand Tua is playing amazing right now. You shouldn't be giving up 36 at home. Oh, I understand that Derrick Henry is really good. You shouldn't be giving up 27 to the Titans. I don't care. Ryan Tannehill's back there. What are we doing? They should not be doing this. And again, Kellen Moore is going to get a lot of praise, but I think a lot of Cowboy fans were not exactly super they were not super sad. And me as kind of like a Cowboy fan-ish, because my dad's a Cowboy fan, so I watch all of their games. I watched a lot of stuff from Kellen Moore where it just was not great. Like, listen, this is their first drive. They obviously get a touchback, pass, sack, then they punt. He is very streaky on what he's going to call. Okay, cool. So all right, run, short pass, run, short pass, short pass. Like he does not like mix stuff in very well. It's like, okay, we're going to go out here. We're going to run the heck out of the ball. Oh, that didn't work. All right, next drive. 10 shotgun passes. Like he's really good at scoring points. He's not great at a lot of the game management where it's like, sometimes, you know what? I mean, obviously they would take a win over a loss, but like sometimes scoring 27 is better than scoring 37 because if you're able to control the clock, I think that puts you in a little bit better of a spot. And the Chargers are really worrying for me. Again, this is year however many in a row of the Chargers finding dumb ways to lose games and losing to teams that they shouldn't. So I'm not surprised, but I'm definitely really worried about them.
You should be worried about the Chargers. I think the Chargers should be a playoff team, so I'm also slightly worried about the Chargers. But we know why I'm here. As Emmitt alluded to, this is my pick. These are my boys. The Packers are my boys, but these are my boys. Like I am on record. I do think that Joe Burrow is going to win MVP. I am on record as saying that the Bengals are going to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl, and I am even on record as saying that the Bengals are going to win the Super Bowl this year. I put all my chips and all my eggs into the Bengals basket. I've got nothing left to lose. When you are Jamar Chase and you've got 7 catches for 70 yards in 2 games combined, that's not good. And I want, you know what I want to do? And I'm a fact over feelings guy, but my feelings, my heart, man, it's telling me to like shoot them some bail and be like, but Joe Burrow's got the calf. But I can't do that because nobody told the Bengals to play Joe Burrow these games. Like it is. We saw the Bengals start the season off 0-2 last year. Got it. They went on to the AFC Championship game and I lost. I understand that. The difference between last season and this season is Joe Burrow didn't enter last season with a calf injury. He entered last season 100% healthy, and then he got to the AFC Championship game. You do not get healthier as the season goes on. It doesn't work that way. And so if I'm the Bengals, if I'm looking at our schedule heading into the season, and I need to make a business decision about what is in the best interest of my football team, what is in the best interest of making sure that we can make it to where we want to be, which where they want to be is at the end in Las Vegas with the Lombardi Trophy in their possession. What I'm saying is it worth starting the first 4 games of the season in Cleveland, at home against Baltimore, at home against the Rams on Monday Night Football, and then on the road against Tennessee, and maybe even on the road against Arizona? Is it worth playing those 5 games without Joe Burrow? If it means, and heck, just because the bye week is week 7, maybe let's go into week 6 against the Seahawks without Joe Burrow too. Is it worth it to then have a completely healthy Joe Burrow out of the bye on the road in San Fran, back at home in Buffalo, on the road in Baltimore, against Pittsburgh, on the road in Jacksonville, against Pittsburgh again later on the season, and then on the road in Kansas City, and then at home in Cleveland? Like, is it worth it to have Joe Burrow for those 10 if it means not having him for these first 4 to 6? To me, the answer is yes. Because to me, it's not to be corny, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And what Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals want to do is they want to be back in the Super Bowl, which is where they were a couple of years ago. What they want to do is they want to get back to being at the top of the NFL, or get to, for the first time, the top of the NFL mountain. You can't do that if Joe Burrow is not healthy. And so, whereas coming into this Monday night game, we should be saying, oh, this is a lock for LA because they're the better team. Now it's like, I don't know, because the offense has been anemic. The defense has not been good. It's never been good, but it really has not been looking good so far. Joe Burrow's got a busted up calf, and they're going up against a Rams team that is 1-1, yes, but they're 1-1 without Cooper Kupp. And the defense has been okay, and the offense has been flowing. Now, they did just trade Cam Akers a couple hours ago to the Vikings for like chump change. Fine. But
he wasn't even active last week.
And he wasn't active. But
and
still,
they were trading blows with San Francisco.
What I'm saying is, when you look at this, if I'm the Cincinnati Bengals, bro, I have to take my chances against Cleveland, and I have to take my chances against Baltimore without Joe Burrow. I have to take my chances against LA without Joe Burrow. I have to maybe take because here's the deal, right? And we saw this with Cooper Rush and Dak Prescott a couple, not last season, but or I think it was last season actually, when Dak Prescott went out for a bit with that thumb injury. Mm-hmm. If things are going well, what can you do? You can give Joe Burrow more time to get to completely be 100%, right? So let's say, for example, we get to that week 3 game and it's not looking good, but maybe they get the win and they look well in that win, because I don't think they would have beaten the Browns or the Ravens without Joe Burrow. I don't think so, but maybe they could have. Who knows? But I don't think they would have done so. But they could be they probably could have beaten the Rams without Joe Burrow. Mm-hmm. Does that give you a little bit of confidence to go on the road against Tennessee at 1:00 and maybe beat the Tennessee Titans on the road without Joe Burrow? I think so, because the Titans aren't that good. Does it give you even more confidence to go to Arizona on the road without Joe Burrow and beat the Cardinals? They're the worst team in football. I think so. And if by week 5 you are 2-3, does that give you just enough confidence to say, you know what? We have 2 wins. Let's just push it one more week. Give them 6 full weeks of rest. Or 4 full weeks of rest and 2 weeks of being back in practice but not playing. Then he gets next week in the bye and he can come out fully refreshed, ready to hit the ground running the rest of the way. To me, that should have been what happens. And so while I do expect, and I do hope, of course, because my integrity is on the line here, while I do hope that the Bengals can get it together, I'm also concerned because we know what Joe Burrow and the Bengals can do when he's healthy, but he's not healthy. And that calf's not going to get better. Look, dude, we know this. Having been Aaron Rodgers fans, when he had that toe injury, like that toe didn't get better overnight. That toe didn't get better until after the season. It got better a bit because we had the bye week in the playoffs that year, so he wasn't on that toe at all. But like this isn't. We're just getting into the thick of it. I don't like that decision by the Bengals. I recognize how stacked the AFC is, and I recognize how every single game counts. But bro, we have to think long term. And our long-term goal is to make it to a Super Bowl. Our long-term goal is to win a championship. Our long-term goal is to fully leave the Bungles in the past. And so far, through 2 weeks of the season, the Bengals have been looking like the Bungles because of what I think was a poor decision to start Joe Burrow in week 1 as opposed to have him sit out and wait until he's completely healthy.
Well, I think the Bengals management panicked when making this decision. Because I think that they understand, which I think a lot of us understand, that T. Higgins is not going to be on that team next year. I think a lot of us realize that. And, it would not shock me if they move on from him, especially if their season's really not going well. Maybe they could try to, some team at the deadline, Green Bay, takes a look and is like, hey, we would like T. Higgins. I think they panic because they're like, this is going to be our last best shot for a little bit, right? Because after this season, they're going to have to go pay Jamar Chase. He'll be eligible for a contract extension, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, this is year 3 for him, so he'll be eligible for a contract extension at the end of the season. They got scared, is what they did. And would I bench Joe Burrow, or not bench? Would I have him sitting out for, as far as you would, like, maybe into Seattle? I don't think so. I think you could get away with the first month. I think you could do Cleveland, Baltimore, Los Angeles, and Tennessee. So I think that first time, because I think what's the best game to possibly, get him back and let him start testing the waters in? Arizona. I think that's
I agree.
That would have been, but they panicked. Here's the difference between like what happened with Dak and what happened with Joe. Dak got hurt in a real game. He got hurt in a game, and they were like, we have to figure this out now. They knew he was going into the season with the calf injury. He heard it. Yeah. He heard it in training camp, right? Or before training camp.
It was in training camp. Yeah.
In training camp. And they were, trying to manage it. And Zach Taylor kind of had a weird press conference when he's like, oh, somebody asked for an update. And he's like, well, I said, like, it's like, well, a few weeks ago, I said, in several weeks. So several weeks from that point, like a weird press conference. It's like, okay, I don't really understand what, because he's clearly not healthy, right? That he's clearly not healthy. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me what the Bengals are trying to do, other than they panicked and they feel like maybe this is their last best shot. But I think that your best shot includes a healthy Joe Burrow, as opposed to unhealthy Joe Burrow.
Best shot doesn't include a healthy Joe Burrow. The Bengals' best shot is a healthy Joe Burrow. Like, that's recognized. Like, we have to remember who we're talking about. We are talking about a quarterback, the only quarterback in the league who has beaten Patrick Mahomes multiple times. He's the only quarterback in the league not named Tom Brady, that has been in the AFC, that has been able to go into Arrowhead during the Arrowhead Invitational, that is the AFC playoffs, and beat Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs. He is the only quarterback active today that has kept Patrick Mahomes from making it to the Super Bowl. Now, Tom Brady is the only quarterback ever to keep Pat Mahomes from winning a Super Bowl twice. Kept him from going to one, kept him from winning one when they met in the Super Bowl. I got that. But the Bengals have clearly proven to be what the Bills were supposed to be, which is the heir apparent to the Kansas City Chiefs, the biggest threat to the Kansas City Chiefs, and what should be what a lot of people think will be a dynastic run for that team out there. The Cincinnati Bengals' only shot, forget best shot, their only shot of competing for a championship, their only shot of competing for the playoffs, their only shot for competing with Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, or anyone for that matter, is with Joe Burrow being healthy. And so maybe you're right. Maybe not pushing it past all the way to Seattle is a good idea. But I mean, again, if the team is going, like if the team looks really, really well, of course you want to get Joe in there as soon as possible. But the better the team looks, then it's like, okay, maybe we can push this to the bottom. But I understand Arizona sucks. Get him out there with Arizona. Let him throw 500 yards the first game back, make it feel good. It's not looking good right now, though, for the Cincinnati Bengals. And so I am a bit worried, not just as a football guy, but also because I do have just about all of my season's picks as far as awards are concerned are attached to the great Cincinnati Bengals. So I need this to get figured out so that I don't have a depressing season, because fantasy is not going that great for me right now either. Let's stay in the AFC and let's go down south. Let's talk about the Miami Dolphins, specifically Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. There's really no other way to say this, but like, is this the best 1-2 punch at the wide receiver position in the NFL?
I went into this year thinking that it was going to be very impossible to top, because I think everybody's 1-2 going into the season, or at least most people's, was Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. They've overtaken them, man, and not necessarily. And I think it's because not how well they complement each other, but because they both have the same unstoppable trait, right? Like Jamar Chase and Devontae Adams and Justin Jefferson don't really have that, like, you know, they are elite route runners, but like, I wouldn't say any of them really have like elite hands. Like I love Devontae Adams. I wouldn't say he's like, you know, he doesn't have DeAndre Hopkins level hands, and same for the rest of them. But like, I guess like you could say that Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, like after the catch, you know, have very elite traits. You cannot guard Jalen Waddle or Tyreek Hill. You can't do it. They are way too fast for everybody else out on the football field. And it's apparent every time the ball gets in their hands. Every single time they touch the ball, they could go score a touchdown. And I think they're like one of the few people in the NFL that you can like truly say that about. Because like, oh, you know, they're dangerous with the ball in their hands. No, these guys are. They could take a slant to the house, how Odell Beckham Jr. used to do that, right? Like they could, like we're looking at Jalen Waddle. He only has 8 catches this year for 164 yards. And we're kind of like, ugh, like what's going on with Jalen Waddle? You know, like that is unreal stuff. Tyreek Hill, again, he went absolutely crazy in week 1. He's already up at 16 catches, 255 yards and 3 touchdowns. But like, again, these are 2 guys who Tyreek is averaging about 16 yards a catch. And Jalen Waddle is getting about 20. And we're like, I don't even think this is as elite as they could get, right? Like, and if you truly think about, and I hate to do this because he has been playing well this year, but once or twice a game, Tua like leaves one about 10 yards short, and you're like, oh, it's like, man, what would happen if like Herbert or Mahomes had these guys? Like, we know what happened with Mahomes with Tyreek. It's like, man, if you gave him a second Tyreek, what would happen, right? And so I think it's really hard to try to top Chase and Higgins, but I think these guys have done it. And again, it's the same reason, because again, Tyreek Hill, outside of like his speed, like he's not super like he doesn't have, again, fantastic hands. He's really good after the catch, obviously, but a lot of that is due to his speed. He's not like some elite route runner, at least in my mind. But you can't teach speed. It's hard to say anything other than that. You cannot teach speed, and they are teaching people. They're teaching people about their speed every single week if they don't already know.
That's true. I am inclined to agree that they're the best 1-2 punch in the league. I can't. It's just because I think that it's Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And so maybe I'm biased because I've picked up a lot of big old bias over the last year and some change. But in all seriousness, I mean, like you're right. Speed does kill. And I think the one thing that Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle bring to the table that no other offensive tandem does at the wide receiver position is that you cannot double cover either of these guys. You have to single cover these guys, and you have to just hope for the best. Because if you double cover Tyreek Hill, that means that you got Jalen Waddle and single covered, and he's smoking them. If you double Jalen Waddle, the same can be said for Tyreek. It's like you have to, at all times, you can only commit one guy to each of them. And if you want to double both of them, that's fine. But they've got some other wide receivers out there whose names that we unfortunately as fans and as media don't care enough to know because they don't matter as much as Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. One of those guys will be open for Tua to shred your defense with. So what I would say is, while I don't know if they are necessarily the best tandem, they are definitely the most troublesome tandem. Like, there are ways to neutralize Jamar Chase. There are ways to neutralize T. Higgins. I've yet to see anybody neutralize Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle, let alone in the same game.
Yeah, and I try to say this whenever I'm talking about like who the best receivers in the game are, because I always feel bad leaving Tyreek Hill out, because he's always, it's so weird because he's not physically dominant like a guy like Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, where they're the more stereotypical wide receiver in terms of build and all that stuff. So it's like Tyreek Hill for me isn't the best receiver in football, but he's easily the most unstoppable is the easiest way to put that. Yeah. I think
no, I agree. Cause I don't think Tyreek Hill's top 5, but I mean,
all right. I'm not going to go that far, but I understand where your thought process comes from. Like, like as a pure wide receiver, I don't know, but as you put the ball in his hands, man.
As a weapon from the wide receiver position,
it's almost
if I'm ranking wide receivers, I can name 5 that I think
it's almost a little bit like Deebo Samuel syndrome, right? Where it's like,
yes,
it's
exactly like that.
It's like some people are like, what? Debo's not a top 10 receiver, and it's like, well, yeah, as a pure wide receiver, no, but it's like when you start naming like offensive, like who can do the most, it's like, well, Debo, it's so I
because
understand.
Here's the thing: if we're ranking offensive weapons, if we're just saying who are the best offensive pass catchers, we'll put it that way, because weapons would include running backs and it would get skewed. If we're ranking the top 10 pass catchers in the league, that includes receivers, that includes tight ends. Well, I would say that Tyreek Hill is on that list because as an offensive weapon from that standpoint, he's probably the best. I would say maybe second to his old running mate Travis Kelce, but probably the best. Yeah. But I'm ranking wide receivers. Like if I am drafting wide receivers, I've got every wide receiver available to me, and I have the first overall pick. First of all, I'm picking Justin Jefferson, number 1. Has to be Justin Jefferson. After Justin Jefferson, I would take Devontae Adams. Or I would take Jamar Chase because Jamar Chase is younger than Devontae Adams. That is the top 3 to me. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams. After that, I would take Stephon Diggs. I have always been a Stephon Diggs fan, and I think that Stephon Diggs doesn't get enough respect that he deserves. I think Stephon Diggs is top 4. After Stephon Diggs, if I'm looking for a wide receiver, I would take A.J. Brown. Those, to me, are the 5 best receivers in football. Jettas, Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams, A.J. Brown, Stephon Diggs is my top 5. After those 5, Tyreek Hill's probably that next person, or maybe Cooper Kupp or someone, but it's one of those 2. So I'm just picking who I want to be my wide receiver 1. It's one of those 5 guys, and then Tyreek Hill. But if I'm just saying, like, man, I just want somebody that I have a quarterback, and that would be a great quarterback. Like I've got like a Kirk Cousins back there, and I want to put as many weapons around him as possible. If we're drafting for weapons,
you're starting with Tyreek.
I'm starting with Tyreek Hill if I am drafting for weapons. But if I'm building a team and I'm looking for I want a wide receiver 1, a guy that can run every route in the route tree, a guy whose release is off the charts, a guy who can do it all for a wide receiver, not just with receiving, but also with pass or run blocking, because that's important also. Those are my 5. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, A.J. Brown, in that order. And then whoever after that, I don't care who you pick. But for me, it'd be one of those 5.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Again, it's just both of them, they just have a level of speed that not a whole lot of people outside of like outside of like Madden, Madden 18 Dree Archer have,
Yeah.
it's just
What a
good
pull by
Good
Emmitt
pull.
Sevores.
Yeah,
Man.
yeah,
That's a
yeah.
great pull.
They're just ridiculous. Very hard to stop.
Yeah, I agree. Speaking of hard to stop, while Justin Jefferson is hard to stop, the Vikings so far through 2 games have been very, very easy to stop. If you guys remember, and if you don't, that's fine. I can tell you because I'm a Packers fan and I know this. If you guys remember back to last season, the Minnesota Vikings played the most one possession games in the league last year. They had a one possession game against the Giants, a one possession game against the Lions, the Saints, the Bears, the Dolphins, the Cardinals, the Commanders, the Bills, the Patriots, the Jets, the Colts, the Giants. So they had 12. And of those 12 one possession games, they won all of them. They were 12-0 in one possession games last year. And that is a big part of the reason why they were 13-4 last year. Well, Emmitt, wouldn't you know, in week 1, the Minnesota Vikings had a 3-point game. And just this past Thursday, they had a 6-point game. And they lost both of those games. And I was the one last year who sat on this show and said the Vikings cannot continue to play with fire this way because winning by one possessions is not a recipe for success. And so here we are, 2 weeks into the season, 2 one-possession games, and the Vikings are 0-2. As you mentioned, the Vikings do have to play the LA Chargers next Sunday, and I can assure you, buddy, they are not beating the Chargers by more than one possession if they do come out of there with the win. So, Emmitt, I must ask you, what do the Minnesota Vikings need to do to stop playing with fire?
Well, they got to take care of the football. That's a pretty important thing for them. You look so far this season, especially in that Eagles game, is where it reared its ugly head. But like in the first game of the year, Kirk Cousins had 2 fumbles, lost both of them. He also had a pick. Not great for Kirk Cousins. Then you go on to week 2. And they had 4 fumbles, 3 in the first half, I believe. They could not stop turning the football over. Yes. And when you turn the ball over in 1-score games, you lose every time. It's like clockwork, right? And I think what they're also suffering from a little bit is just like a lack of talent. I think we kind of look at last year's Vikings team, and I think a lot of people kind of focused on the winning and not on the roster. Right? Because we look at this year from last year. Am I a huge fan of Dalvin Cook? No. Was there a reason he was starting over Alexander Madison? Yeah. Am I the biggest Adam Thielen fan of all time? No. But like KJ Osborne shouldn't be asked to, step up into that wide receiver 2 role. And listen, Jordan Addison will get there. I believe he will get there, and he's going to be better than Adam Thielen ever was, I believe, when it comes to at least statistically. Because he just has a little bit more in his bag. I hate to sound like we're talking about like basketball and like crapping on Giannis or something, but like Jordan Addison has more to him than what Adam Thielen does. But it's like KJ Osborne shouldn't be, your second leading target at receiver. He shouldn't be. Like, yes, it's awesome Justin Jefferson has 20 catches so far, but like Jordan Addison only has 7 and he's getting 19 yards a catch and has 2 touchdowns. Like, they don't have a whole lot of talent on that side of the football. And if they do, it's very young talent. And I'm not a big TJ Hawkinson guy. They made him, I think they gave him the richest.
He's the highest paid tight end the game has ever seen. Yeah.
Yeah. And which I don't really understand, but like, I guess when you trade for a guy, go for it. But then that defense too, although it has improved a little bit, just with the influx of like younger talent, I'm still not super impressed. Like the big selling point for them this offseason was the fact that they added Brian Flores and their defense was still giving up 34 points. They did better last year, if I'm not mistaken, against the Eagles in week 2, right? If I'm not mistaken, I think it was like 24-7, if I'm not mistaken. That sounds right.
It was 24-7. Yes.
24-7. This year, their defense not looking super hot. But I guess that's what happens when one of your big offseason signings is Dean Lowry. Eek. And then
former Packer, love him for that. There's a reason
Packer,
he's a former
Packer, right?
Packer.
Yeah, and then you look and Andrew Booth, the guy that they spent, I don't remember if it was a first or a second round pick on last year. He's not even one of their top 2 corners when you look at their depth chart. Byron Murphy, I really like the guy because he came out of the University of Washington. But like he hasn't really looked awesome. Harrison Smith is just really old. Louis Cine is not even starting, and they spent a high pick on him last year as well. They're just a very talent deficient team, especially on the defensive end. And then when you are putting your defense in a tough situation because you've turned the ball over 7 times through 2 games, yeah, you're going to lose, especially one-score games. And then again, you look at the rest of their schedule, and they have it a little tough. Again, elimination game against the Chargers, who we talked about a little bit earlier. Then they have Carolina, which should be good for them. But then Kansas City's going to suck. They get Chicago, another layup, but then San Francisco, Green Bay. And then they have a run of NFC South teams. But then I still have, Cincinnati, Detroit twice in the last 3 weeks of the year, and then Green Bay again. It's not looking great for them. But as Packer fans, like, who could have seen this one coming? Oh, everybody, right? Everybody saw last year. And, I would say that I'm like, I feel bad, but I don't. They were talking a lot of crap last year, especially like, the 2019 Packers, worst 13-win team of all time. Well, who is it now? We won a playoff game. Listen, we won a playoff game. That's all I have to say.
We did win a playoff game that year.
We did not get beat in our own house by Daniel Jones. That's we didn't check it down. We didn't take a 6-yard check down on 4th and 13. That's what we didn't do. I'll tell you that. Tough for the Vikings.
There's a lot of things Emmitt Sevores does. He does not tell a lie, though.
No.
Tell a lie.
Tough for the Vikings.
Here's my thing. I agree with everything that you said. And I'm just going to take the opportunity to scrap for the Vikings because I'm a Packers fan. That's what we do. To all you Vikings fans out there who took that week 1 win, and it was a win that you deserved last year, because we looked terrible. That was y'all's Super Bowl because you haven't done much since that. You went 13-4 and you got beat on by Danny Dimes, and then you came out here this week and you lost to who'd you lose to in week 1? Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield, a guy who was on his 3rd team in 2 seasons, is who you are playing.
And 4th team overall. And 4th team.
And his 4th team overall. Not a good look. Then you lost to the Philadelphia Eagles, who, if we're being honest, have not been looking like the Philadelphia Eagles that we saw at this point of the season last year.
Yeah.
But they're still the reigning NFC champions who will cut you some slack. Let Vikings fans tell it on Twitter this offseason. This was Justin Jefferson's time. This was the era of Big Kirko, as they like to say, had arrived, and the Vikings would be winning the division. And as it stands right now, the Vikings are only in 3rd place in the division because the Bears hold a divisional loss and the Vikings do not. Who do you have to thank for that, Minnesota? The Green Bay Packers. So instead of clowning Packers and Packers fans, you should be thanking us that you are not bringing up the caboose in an NFC North division that you swore you were going to win for the 2nd consecutive season in a row. So Thank you. I bid you a good day. Y'all are going to lose next week to the Chargers. And hey, can we be honest here for a second? I'm just going to go through their schedule. I am seeing, I'm taking the Packer hat off. I'm just looking objectively at what we've seen so far the first 2 weeks. They're not going to win next week. I don't see how they can win next week. Although the Chargers also play sloppy football, so they probably could. I like their chances against the Panthers.
Yeah.
They're going to get boat raced by the Chiefs. They're going to get spanked by the Chiefs.
Yeah.
They'll probably beat the Bears. They will then get beat down by the 49ers. They ain't beating us in Lambeau. I mean, that doesn't happen. I would like to give them the benefit of doubt against the Falcons, but the Falcons have looked pretty good so far through 2 weeks.
Also, I don't see their defense stopping Bijan. Ours couldn't, and we have a lot more talent. They are not beating the Saints. I am high on the Saints. I like the Saints. Hopefully by week 11, the Broncos have gotten their act together, so we'll see. If they have, that's a loss for them. It's also outside in November, probably in the cold and in the mountains. Not a good recipe for success if you're the Minnesota Vikings who play indoors.
They will probably beat the Bears at home. They have their bye week in week 13. They'll probably beat the Raiders as long as Joe Burrow's calf is fixed by week 15. They're going to get dog walked by the Bengals. And can we be honest? These last 3 weeks of the season, Lions, Packers, Lions.
I'll say they split with Detroit, and like, listen, it would not shock me if they beat us. Like it wouldn't, again, because we'll talk about it in our the next thing that we talk about. But like, the Packers aren't a team who, at least as of right now, maybe they do by week 17, but like they don't know how to win a lot of games, and I feel like that could be a close one. But like,
we might not know how to win, but as it stands right now, I'm looking at a green and yellow G at the top of the standings in the division. So I'm just saying.
Fair enough.
I'm just saying. I'm looking at a green and yellow G, green and white G. I'm sorry, with a yellow trim at the top. At the top of the standing. I apologize. I know my team's colors. I'm sorry. Anyway, I'm just saying. We got hope. As always, we did it last week. We're gonna do it again this week. Emmitt, give me your 3 highest of highs coming out of week 2.
Yeah, I'm gonna listen. We're not gonna get through this show without talking about the Green Bay Packers. That's just what's gonna happen. Man, Jordan Love looks good enough. I think. I haven't seen special from him yet. I will say that. I think I've seen a couple of throws that make me say wow, but I have not seen any special. He had a really nice ball. I think it was to Malik Heath in the back of the end zone that did not get caught last week versus the Falcons, which it was a very Aaron Rodgers-like throw. But they have impressed me a little bit as a team, I think. Well, not as a team. As Jordan Love and some of the young pieces on that offense to go and play against Atlanta with, the lack of people that you were down there doing it with, right? Like Bakhtiari just can't stay healthy at this point. Elton Jenkins, he's now going to be out a couple weeks, but then Christian Watson didn't play. Aaron Jones didn't play. And at one point he had led 4 straight scoring drives. Like, I think that is a very good spot for the Packers to be in. When it comes to the entire NFC, we are third in point differential behind the Cowboys and the San Francisco 49ers, which is always a pretty good stat to be high in.
They're the 2 best teams in the division.
So yeah, I mean the Vikings literally finished last year. It was 13-4 and had a negative point differential. So point differentials, I would say, a pretty fun stat. But yeah, so if you're third in the NFC in point differential, again, you're 1-1 and your 1 loss is by 1 point, and it's a game that realistically the coaching staff choked away. We shouldn't have lost that game. Listen, we did, but if they play that one back over again, it's hard to see that they make the mistakes. I'm going to give the Green Bay Packers, one of my highest of highs.
Sure.
I'm going to go number 2. I'm going to go Dak Prescott and the Cowboys so far. Listen, they have not been overly impressive on the offensive side of the football. You don't have to be when that offense is truly, or when that defense is rolling how it is. But Dak Prescott, he's taking care of the football. He has 1 turnover worthy play from PFF all year long. Granted, very easily could have been a pick 6 to Sauce Gardner. But again, he's doing what they want him to do. And I think that that's something that's super important when it comes to the Cowboys offenses. Sometimes they can try to get a little too cute. But I mean, they gave Tony Pollard, I think it was 30 something touches last week. And do I think that he can keep up that? No, but I do think that if they continue to have the success that they want to have, I think that they are going to have to lean on him a little bit more than they did in week 1, but not as much as they did in week 2. But good on Dak Prescott for keeping control of the ball. I'm really stuck on this third one, man. I don't know if you're going to talk about. I will give a mini shout out to the Chiefs defense because I really, really do like all the young pieces that they have over there. Trent McDuffie, a UW guy. Always like to see him succeed. But I'm gonna go the other one. Man, he did not finish last week as he left with a concussion. Man, Anthony Richardson's so exciting. He is so exciting to watch. It is really, really fun. I did my boss's fantasy draft for him, and I got him Anthony Richardson as his quarterback. And listen, so like it's not my team, but like my boss doesn't like really watch football, so like it is my team. Man, he's fun to watch. Because I'm very boring when it comes to fantasy quarterback. I'm usually like I'll go get like a Rodgers. It's a guy I'm like, cool, I'll never have to root against him in a game or whatever. Or like a Kirk Cousins or like Dak. But like Man, having one of those guys who's just out there running and just like kind of just playing football like a Josh Allen, man, that's really fun to root for. Hopefully he learns to protect himself a little bit, right? He got banged up at the end of week 1 and got a concussion in week 2. So obviously he's going to have to learn to protect himself a little bit more, but man, he's really fun to watch. And I'm really excited to see what the Colts do through this season.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to pick up where you left off. I think Anthony Richardson is on my highest of highs because I've talked about it all offseason. There's a lot of boom bust potential there. We saw a lot of the boom last week.
Oh, yeah.
Albeit against the Texans, I get it, but we saw a lot of the boom last week for Anthony Richardson. 2, if I'm not mistaken, 2 first quarter rushing touchdowns for Anthony Richardson for the Indianapolis Colts. It was a very great win for them last week. My second highest of high, I have to give it to the Falcons. They're 2-0. They're 2-0 with an offense that is super young, a team overall that's super young, and they have, I would say, a chance to make things interesting in that division, a division that I do think is also going to be won by the Saints. But they've got, I would say, a chance for the first time probably since they went to the Super Bowl to start the season 3-0 because they're going to Detroit this week. And I'd say that's a winnable game. Now, I think Detroit's going to win that game because they are the better team, in my opinion, but that is not by any means a lock for the Lions to win that game. The Falcons have a chance to start the season 3-0 before they get their first loss against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and it will be the first international game of the season when they have to play the Jaguars in week 4. But I think they deserve my second highest of high. But the highest of high for me this week, this one was a tough one. Like the Anthony Richardson one, no brainer. Falcons one for me, no brainer. But if I'm going to come up with a third, I got to say it's Tampa Bay Buccaneers because they're 2-0. And they're supposed to be mid this year. And they can fall off. But in the great words of Stephen A. Smith, as he does every week, these highs of highs, these lows of lows, they're fluid, man. They can change on a week to week. They're very, very fluid. And so as of right now, given that fluidity, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are on one of my highest of highs for this week. They're 2-0. Baker Mayfield, as you mentioned, he's not a world beater. He's not an MVP candidate, but he is playing great football. Pretty good football. Mike Evans is playing pretty good football. This defense is playing pretty good football. Overall, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers look like a team that we need to pay attention to as the season progresses. And if you take a look at their next couple of games before we get to their bye, what is in week 5, they have a game against the Eagles on Monday night, which will probably be a loss, but then they do have a divisional game on the road in New Orleans against the Saints. They get to see that, like, this is a schedule where we can see the Buccaneers potentially win, or not win the division, but they could, but I also think they could potentially make the playoffs because of how they've started. We saw last season the Giants started very strong, ended not as strong, but they didn't make the playoffs. We could see something similar with the Buccaneers this season. They get my third highest of high because they are 2-0, and you got to show some love for that. I don't like ending things on a negative note, but we got to go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. So what are your 3 lowest of lows from week 2?
Yeah, the Denver Broncos have to make this list, man. They got dog walked. I don't care about the Hail Mary. They got dog walked at home after having an 18-point lead at one point through the game by Sam Howell. The guy you're paying a bunch of money to in Russell Wilson, or I guess his contract hasn't even kicked in yet, can't be getting outplayed by Sam Howell. Like it just can't happen. So they're just a gigantic dumpster fire, honestly. Like I think last year there was a lot of people who were really, really high on them, but I look at their roster and I don't know, man. I don't see it. I really don't. Like, yes, their defense last year was really, really awesome. Really, really awesome. But they are also kind of suffering from that not super talented, right? Like their defensive line, they don't really have a single guy there, right? Like they kind of have gotten rid of all of those guys, right? Obviously, we talked about Bradley Chubb got traded. Shelby Harris got traded in the original Russell Wilson trade. Like Randy Gregory's probably the most Randy Gregory and Frank Clark are probably your 2 guys who are like your, biggest and best, but Frank Clark is 30. And Randy Gregory is also 30 and also is the biggest risk when it comes to suspension, fine, staying healthy. possible, right? They're just not very talented on the defensive end anymore, outside of Patrick Surtain, who is a top 2, top 3 cornerback in all of football. But it starts with Russ, and Sean Payton talked a lot before the season about the previous coaching job from Nathaniel Hackett. And granted, Nathaniel Hackett, not a great coach, but he's not exactly impressing me a whole lot, Sean Payton. And you know what? When do we start to, talk about how good that Saints defense was? And maybe that's why they were winning a bunch of games late in Drew Brees' career, as opposed to Sean Payton being some excellent coach. When do we start that dialogue? I'll leave it there. I'm also not going to get through this episode. We talked about the Vikings, and there's no way I'm going to get through without trashing the other 2 NFC North teams. Detroit's defense appears to have not gotten any better, man. They went out and they spent a bunch of money on some C+, B- corners, and we're like, we fixed it, guys. We did it. We got CJ Gardner-Johnson and Cam Sutton. Yeah, and Emmanuel Mosley. Yeah, we fixed it. No, you didn't. You didn't. You tried to throw again. You tried to throw together a bunch of mediocre pieces and wrap it up in a bow like Jared Allen used to do. Like, hey, ta-da! But it's not working. It's not working. You should not be giving up. Yes, I understand that Seattle's offense is very talented, and again, I'm known Seahawk hater here, so a lot lower on them than everybody else is. You should not, for the second year in a row, be getting outplayed and outscored at home by Seattle. Again, the leading rusher in the game, again, behind an awesome offensive line, 67 yards from David Montgomery. 67. You drafted a running back in the first round. Use him. Why are you not using him? Aiden Hutchinson looked awesome in week 1. Didn't see a whole lot of him in week 2. I could be wrong. I didn't see a whole lot of him. So they again, another Jared Goff pick 6 in a high scoring game. Another pick 6. Yes, his big thing is, he doesn't turn the ball over. Listen, that's awesome when it's Aaron Rodgers, when it's a guy who can go out and he makes all these spectacular throws and plays, and he doesn't turn the ball over. Whereas Jared Goff is very mediocre and apparently doesn't turn the ball right. He got on this streak at the end of last year where it's oh my gosh, Jared Goff doesn't turn the football over. And it's well, that's not really how he's been throughout his career, if I'm not mistaken. He was never really a massive turnover guy, but to pretend that he was just Mr. Protect the ball when, 2018, 12 picks, 2019, 16 picks. And I remember Dak Prescott getting killed for 15 picks, if I'm not mistaken. 2020, 13 picks, 20 touchdowns. He's net, last year was his best statistical season ever. And he went on literally the 3rd best run in NFL history of not throwing picks in pass attempts. Are we expecting that from this guy who we've seen what he is? We need to stop, especially and again, this is going to turn into a Seahawks and Geno Smith rant too, but it's we've seen what these guys are. We saw what Geno Smith was. I'm still not buying into him. We've seen what Jared Goff is. The guys who traded up, or sorry, I guess not the exact same guys, but the team who traded up in the draft to get him didn't want him anymore. They were we think we could be a really good team if we had anybody but him at quarterback. And we saw them go in, and I think they played a playoff game at Seattle where, John Wofford got the start. And granted, he left with an injury, but Jared Goff on a thumb, wound up going out there and playing just well enough to win. I really don't see it with the Lions. Granted. Our division, not great. And how confident am I in the Packers after last week? Not as much as I was after the previous week. I thought all right, you should be able to go in there and beat Desmond Ridder. But Detroit's defense doesn't look super great, and especially now with CJ Gardner-Johnson, who is one of their big additions, looking like he's going to be out for the year, or out at least for a little bit. Probably not, super great, right? I think they have 0 sack, or sorry, not 0 sacks. I was looking at a different stat there. They have not done super well on defensive end all season. I guess they beat the Kansas City Chiefs and they held them to a lot of points, but I think a lot of that was more to the Kansas City Chiefs kind of giving up the game, or Kadarius Toney giving up the game. And then again, I can't leave out the Bears. Man, you see what happened this morning? Defensive coordinator resigns. man, got lit up by Jordan Love and Baker Mayfield and was like, I can't do this anymore. The Bears continue to be a clown show who can't develop a quarterback, who just tries to take all the players from all the other NFC North teams and like Frankenstein themselves together a winning team. But it's like, all right, man, you have fun with like Equanimous St. Brown and Chase Claypool and Luke Getsy and all these guys. And hey, let's let's just throw around some money to linebackers in the year of our Lord 2023. Like, let's just do that. And then like, we'll try to microwave something real quick. And then we're not even going to use DJ Moore, who we got instead of a first round pick. I don't know. I had to make sure all of the NFC North outside of the Packers got some smoke. Every time I have to make sure that, they remember, although we did not win the division last year, they remember who the big dog is.
Yeah, that's no problem with me. I do have 3 lowest of lows. They are all from the AFC. We have all kind of tap danced around them for the bit, but I'm going to talk about it some more. The Cincinnati Bengals are not the lowest of low for me, but they are one of my lowest of lows because of the calf injury. I've already talked about it. I'm not going to cry on the stream tonight, so I'm not going to go into it some more, but just know that they do deserve to be on here. I am not an unbiased lowest of low. Second, it's the LA Chargers. Won't get into it that much because I am also a Justin Herbert fan and I don't want to cry on the stream until so far. I'm 0-2 with where I like to be, but I will say this. First team ever to score 50-plus points in 2 weeks and be 0-2, the Los Angeles Chargers.
Hey, listen,
Brandon Saylor should be fired by the end of the season.
Man, dude, they know how to go down in just spectacular fashion, don't they? Oh, yeah. Like they are the most entertaining football team, like 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter and later. Like, it is so much fun to just like, they're sitting there with the lead and the ball and you're like, man, it's going to be awesome when they lose this game. Like, I can't wait to see what fumbled punt or what botched snap is going to happen here. They're just the most, it's like a car crash in NASCAR, right? Where it's like, you just like, you can't look away. You're just like, covering up your face, but like still peeking that eye over. They're glorious, man.
Now, we all know where I'm going with my absolute lowest of low. If you don't know where I'm going with my absolute lowest of low, buckle your seatbelts because I'm going to take you on a ride. About 18 months ago, news broke that a surefire future Hall of Fame quarterback had waived his trade clause to go from one small city in Seattle to another kind of small city in Denver, and go from the Seahawks to the Broncos. That quarterback is, of course, Mr. Russell Wilson, Mr. Unlimited. And since Mr. Unlimited has gone to Denver, the Denver Broncos have won 5 football games. 5.
Out of how many?
Out of 19 at this point. they're 5-14 at this point with Mr. Unlimited. So here's
you're not holding it out for long enough. Yeah. Unlimited.
Probably not. But here's the thing, right? So this is here's what everybody said. Oh my God, they're gonna have some competent quarterback play for the first time since Peyton Manning won the Super Bowl. Yeah, have they really had competent quarterback play for the first time since Peyton Manning won the Super Bowl? No, because first of all, they won more games with Drew Lock the year before than they did with Russell Wilson last season. That's a problem. They're 5. They've yet to in 19 games win the same amount of games that Drew Lock won them the year before. That's a problem. It's also kind of embarrassing. That's the first thing. Here's the second thing, what's most important. You got all this Walmart money out here in Denver. And Russell Wilson's 35 years old this year, and he's getting paid $8 million this year to play football. He's getting paid $17 million next year to play football. And then that Walmart money kicks in because in 2025, he's making $37 million to play football. And the year after, it becomes $40 million. I'm sorry, I keep saying thousand. It's not thousand. It's million. He's getting paid $40 million to play football in 2026, and then 44 in 2027, and then $50 million. Half $50 million to play football in 2028. And so far, in Russell Wilson's illustrious Denver Broncos career, what he has shown you is that he isn't better than Drew Lock. He can't win you more games than Mr. Drew Lock. And if you want to sit here and if you want to say, oh, well, it's because of the coaching, and if you're Sean Payton and that's what you want to do, that's fine. Sean, here's the problem, though. So far, through 2 games, Russell Wilson has thrown 5 touchdowns, 1 pick, and you've lost 2 games. Last year, Russell Wilson completed 61% of his passes, 16 touchdowns, 11 picks. Who is Russell Wilson? Is Russ cooked? He is. And so last year, I had to sit down, had to listen to the great Justin Marvel, I had to listen to Steve A. Smith, I had to listen to Guru, and all these other people sit here and swear to me that the Denver Broncos were Super Bowl contenders, and they won 5 games. Well, they say, oh, well, no one anticipated that Russell Wilson would look as bad as he did. Fine. I will cut you and give you that very lazy excuse. But then what did people do this year? Everyone heard
the same thing.
Sean Payton. Sean Payton's leaving the Fox Sports desk, and he's coming to Denver, and he's going to put enough ingredients in this stew, and Russ is going to start cooking again. And so far, Russ has cooked up 2 losses. 2 losses.
Yep.
2 losses to the Las Vegas Raiders and the Washington Commanders. Really? And you still want me to believe that the Denver Broncos can beat the Chargers or the Chiefs or the Bills or the Bengals or the Ravens or the Dolphins or the Browns or even the Steelers? No, they can't. And so if you are the Denver Broncos,
thing here is like how they're losing the games, right? Because you look at the stat line and you're like, wow, like 33 points, like that's not bad. Then you look, it's like, oh, wait, outside of the Hail Mary, they scored 6 points in the second half against the Washington Commanders. And then you go to Vegas in week 1. They put up, again, you look, and obviously 16 points isn't a lot, but when your defense, well, because what the stat was last year, it's like they would have won like 12 games or like 11 games had they just scored 17 points. Well,
here's the thing.
There it is
Well,
again, where they
could have
scored 17 points
and
they scored 3 points in the second half against Vegas. These are, and here's the most important thing. They lost 2 games at home. At home. You can't listen. If you're on the road, you'll get like a little bit of slack. Like, again, you can't lose the Commanders anywhere. My personal thing.
You can't lose the Commanders anywhere in the universe. I don't care if it's Earth, Venus, Mercury. I don't care where. You cannot lose.
If it's in the Milky Way, you can't lose to Washington. And they put up 3 points in the second half on the Raiders defense that not great. Don't know if you knew that. Not great. They gave up 38 points to Buffalo. Not a great defense. No, sorry. I interrupted you. Keep going. Listen, I hope.
No, let's talk about that part.
Send this clip to Steezy, man. He's.
I know
you were busting him up last week too.
Let's talk about that. So let's look at last season. Last season they played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 games last year they played where they lost and didn't score 7 points, and it was a 1 possession game. If they would have scored 17 points in those games, they would have been 4 wins, 2 ties. So it would have been, let's do some math. They would have been 9-6-2, a playoff team. If they scored 20 points in those games, they would have been a whopping 11-5.
Yeah.
11-5. 11-5 for the Denver Broncos. That's a Super Bowl contender. That's a playoff team, sure. So far this season, how'd they start the season off this year? Unironically, they lost 17-16. The exact same way they lost last year. 17-16. And then they turned it around, and you have to think we're surely, just like last season, I've got a bad football team coming to town. A bad football team, not in a good way. This team sucks. Just like the Texans last year. Last year, they could barely put up 10 points. They won this, or they put up 16 points and beat the Texans 16-9. This week, they win all. They got home and they said, you know what? We're going to beat the Commanders. They were up 21-3, and they lost 35-33. And I'm supposed to sit here and believe that all that Walmart money that they paid Sean Payton is going to fix Russell Wilson. Really? You think they're going down to South Beach next week and beating the Dolphins? I don't think they're beating the Dolphins this upcoming week. Could they beat the Bears? Sure. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Say they beat the Bears. They can beat the Jets now that the Jets don't have Aaron Rodgers. But can they really?
Yeah, I'm not even sure.
I don't think so. I don't think so. If Zach Wilson doesn't turn the ball over, I don't know. Zach Wilson plays like he played week 1. I don't know. They might actually lose that game. Let's give them the benefit of that. Let's say they win the game. Are they going to Arrowhead and beating the Chiefs? No one goes to Arrowhead and beats the Chiefs in this division. Nobody. So you can count that as a loss. Will they beat the Packers? I don't think so. But maybe. I'm a Packers fan. I'm not supposed to think so, but they might. They're not beating the Chiefs when the Chiefs go to Denver because Pat Mahomes doesn't lose in Denver. Then they've got a bye week, so they'll beat themselves in the bye. Sure. They come out of the bye week, they go to Buffalo. Probably a loss. They have to play Minnesota. I don't want to give Minnesota any credit, but the Minnesota Vikings might actually
probably
win that
a loss.
game.
Yeah.
Are they going to beat the Browns? If the Browns defense we've been seeing these past couple weeks continues to be the Browns defense, they might not beat the Browns. Will they beat the Texans? I hope so. And I hope for their sake this time around they score more than 16 points when they do it. Will they beat the Chargers in Vegas? I mean, in LA? They could. Again, for their sake, I hope so, because the Chargers look rough. But maybe they'll get it together. They should. Will they beat the Lions? I hope so. Will they beat the Patriots? Well, they better. Then the Chargers again, they close up with the Raiders. Why did I just run down the schedule? Because I am looking at, again, for the second consecutive season, a team that's supposed to be a Super Bowl contender that might not even make the playoffs. They might not even make the playoffs. They might not even make the playoffs. The Denver Broncos, for the second consecutive season, are probably going to be bringing up the caboose in the AFC West. They might just be. They might just be.
Yeah.
And for all you people out there,
I see 4, 5 wins on there, right? Like the Bears.
For all you people out
Jets.
there.
Yeah.
Look, I am not a Russell Wilson hater.
I am.
I'm not. I want to make that crystal clear. Do I hate that he played for the Seahawks and caused me some pain as a Packers fan? Absolutely. But if we just date back to the last time we saw the Broncos play football, which was January 8th, where they beat the Chargers for their 5th win of last season, they won one game since then. They won one game since then. And the one game they've won since then was in the preseason against the Rams. So it doesn't even matter. They're 5-19 in the Russell Wilson era. I'm sorry, 5-14 in the Russell Wilson era. Through 19 games that Russell Wilson's played in the Denver Broncos uniform, they're 5-14. There is no more riding for Denver. There's no playoffs for Denver. There's no more competent quarterback play for Denver. And the problem is you paid Russell Wilson all that Walmart money, and this is what you have. And you're not going to be able to move off from him. Because I don't care how desperate a team is. I don't think anybody wants this.
No shot.
I don't think anybody wants this. I think there's a lot of teams out there.
Ask Cleveland.
Yeah. I am sure. And they might need to make sure that they haven't lost their receipt. Because they might need to go knock on Roger Goodell's door and ask for a refund. Because that's a mess. We don't have enough time to get into all that. Because they'll probably suck it up. They'll probably suck against some more next week, and they'll be on my lows for next week. It is always a pleasure to have my guy, Emmitt Sevores, on the show. Not just because he's a Packers fan, because it's always good to talk football with my guy. As you can tell, he's on the other side of the country because he still has daylight outside. Do I still have daylight? No. It's dark outside because it's almost 10 o'clock. But it's almost 7 o'clock over there in the great city of Seattle and the great state of Washington. So, Emmitt, before we get out of here, can you please tell everyone where they can find you and all of your content?
Of course, at Emmitt J. Sevores on Instagram and Twitter, the Emmitt Sevores Show on YouTube, and then at Sevores on TikTok. Again, I always love coming on here. Again, is it just because I like talking, Packers? No. Is it just because I like crapping on the rest of the NFC North? Maybe a little bit, but it's always a great time to be on here with Marcus. And I'm sure this won't be the last time that I'll be on this season. And you know what? Maybe we come back again. I was like looking forward to this. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go and we're going to be 2-0 and like, we're going to be leading, we're going to be leading off. It didn't happen, but
still leading the division. But
hey, we are tied for the division lead, baby. If you take a look at who's up, that's us. Hey, 1-0 in the division. Doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah. I love it. So listen, it's always a pleasure to have him on the show. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. If you guys are listening later on, please remember to like and subscribe to the Give Us a Shot Network. A lot of great content happening over here. In case you missed last night's episode of the Protect Our Queens podcast with myself and my guy Martin Soares, we interviewed the incomparable Giselle Gigi Banks, and that is available for your watching, your viewing, and listening pleasure right here on YouTube as well as wherever else you get your podcast. So For my guy, Emmitt Sevores, I am Marcus, the Go Talker Marcus, sign off. Thank you guys for watching. You guys enjoy the rest of your lives. And remember, we'll be right back here next week with some more NFL football. Good night, everybody.